Welcome back. In the last video we prepared this recipe screen, but we have not displayed the categories yet, or we weren't ready for that. So therefore I'm going to create new composable. So one composable is going to take care of the category screen, which needs to have the categories to display. So this will be a list of categories. So categories, which will be a list of categories, so of our category class data class that we created earlier. So this category screen needs to have those in order to start displaying something. So it doesn't care where it gets them from. That's what our main view model is taking care of. Okay, so now we can go ahead and display something called lazy vertical grid. So a lazy vertical grid gives us basically this behavior that you see here. So this is not a list. This is not a list where I have two items next to each other, but, or a list view, or a lazy column, for example. But what it is a lazy grid view or a vertical grid. So it's basically the same thing, but that it allows to have items in a grid format. You can say how many columns you want to have, and it's lazy, so it allows you to scroll, which means it allows you to have a bunch of items in there. So there are different ways how you can define such a lazy vertical grid. How I'm going to do it, I'm going to use grid cells dot fixed to fix it to be 2. Now there are other ways to do it, but I'm just going to say, okay, I just want to have 2 columns, so to speak, and then I'm going to say fill the entire width. So modifier will be modifier dot fill max, well, actually max size, the entire screen. But then obviously the lazy vertical grid needs to have a content. So the content will be our list of items, and the items we get from our view state, which contains the different categories. Now we need to say how each item looks like. Therefore we're going to create another composable. So this composable takes care of how each item looks like. So I'm going to call this one fun category item, and it needs to know the category, and the category will contain information about its ID, about the name of the category, about the image, as well as the description. Okay, so we now can go ahead and use that category object that will be passed to each of the items to display them. I'm going to display it inside of a column, where I'm going to define that the column should have a modifier, which will be modifier dot padding of 8 density pixels, as well as, and we need to import DP here, as well as fill max size. So it should take the entire size that it requires, so to speak. And I want it to be centered horizontally as well. So here, horizontal alignment will be alignment dot center horizontally. Let me put that into a separate line. So these are the parameters I'm going to pass to the column. But now, what do I want to display inside of this column? Well, I want to display a text, right? So the text should be, and the text can have multiple parameters. One will be category dot str category. The other one will be color, and I'm just going to say the color will be black. So color dot black. Then I want the text to have a certain style, where I'm going to state that it should have a text style of font weight. And let me actually import text style so that the IDE helps me a little bit. I want to use the Compose version, and I'm going to set the font weight to be bold. So font weight bold. I'm going to go over the code in a bit. And the modifier, I want to have some padding. So modifier dot padding, and it should have some padding towards the top. And I need to add a comma here so that the error disappears. So basically what I have here is, I'm just going to say that I want to have a text to be displayed, and it's this text here that you see, this. So each of those category items has an image and it has a text associated to it. And I'm just displaying the text here. I'm just saying, okay, it should have a little space towards the top. It should have a certain font weight, so it should be bold. The color should be black, and the text itself, so the content should be category.str category. So it's basically, if we look at our category class, it's the str category. So basically the name of the category. Okay. Now that's the text. Now let's go over to the image. So how should an image look like? Because we are in a column, so that means the items will be put on top of each other. So here I'm just gonna say, let's use image. Now image, we need to import. And there are multiple choices for image. I'm going to use the composable version. Now this image needs a painter. So it needs to know what the image should look like. So the content, it should paint the image, so to speak. Where do we get that? Well, we can load that via using remember async painter. And where do we get the data from? We get it from category.str category thumb. So this is basically the content of the image, so what the image should display, and this is going to asynchronously get us that image. So you see we are using IO coil KT coil compose. So wait a second, let me hover over it like this. You see we are using IO coil KT coil compose 2.4 AR classes job. So this function here, or this composable, is something that we have added via this line here. We said, okay, please take care of all of the overhead, all of the complicated stuff that comes with loading an image from the internet. And this implementation here allows us to do it with this simple line. So it's loading a file, an image, from the internet asynchronously, and it's returning an asynchronous image painter, which we can then pass into this painter property for the image composable. Now this image needs some additional information, but for now we basically have this here is basically the URL where the image is, and it's just taking care of everything. We don't need to do any of the setting up asynchronous functions and all of that. Like, it's all done for us. That's just so amazing. This is crazy. Then you need to have a content description. I'm just gonna set there will be no content description, and you can modify how the image should look like. So I'm gonna say modifier is going to be modifier dot fill max size. So it should take the entire size that it has available. And then I'm going to use the aspect ratio of 1. So I'm just saying use the aspect ratio of 1, which means that it's just going to be as wide as it is high. So the image that we're using. So that's what the category item will look like. Now what I want to do is, inside of this lazy vertical grid, I get the lazy grid scope, which gives me the individual items that I want to display. So I can go ahead and say items, which will be categories. So we pass the categories as items, and categories is a list of category. And now for this to work, we need to import extension function lazy grid scope items. So what that now allows us is to get the category. So you see it category. So we get this lazy grid item scope, but we also get it category. So now we can just say category and then minus arrow key and display the category item with the category being the category. Damn. So basically we prepared how an individual item should look like. So each category item needs a category because it needs to know which data it should display. Then this list categories contains a bunch of individual category items. So we're saying for every single category item that you have available inside of your list of categories, pass that into a new category item. And that will now, inside of our lazy vertical grid, which has 2 columns, populate a bunch of categories and display them on the screen. So now where do we want to display category screen? Well, inside of our else block. And here we need to pass, what is it? Categories. We need to pass a list of category. So where do we get this list from? Because we need to set the categories value. We get that from our view state. Because our view state is what we set up earlier, is of type category state. And this category state contains the items of our, well, that we loaded from the internet, of all of the categories. So the internet response, the HTTP response, the request response, contains the categories. And now we can use that view state dot list. And there we are. So now we get this view states list, which is a list of categories, which we get from our recipe state. And then we will be able to display it. So now that we get all of that, let's actually go over to our main activity. Let's get rid of greeting and of the greeting composables here. And let's instead display our recipe screen. And we will see that our program keeps closing or stopping. And that is because we have tried to access the internet, but we have never actually asked for the access. Basically, we need to tell in our Android manifest that we want to use the internet. And that is what we're going to set up in the next video. Okay, so we're super close to finally being able to run our application and see all of the hard work that we've put in today. It was a long day, I know. There was a lot going on. We learned so many new concepts, and it's quite complex concepts as well. But we're so close to the finish line. So see you in the next video.